My name is Rabbi David Eliah, and for decades I have dedicated my life to studying the Torah, teaching its wisdom, and guiding my congregation in the ways of our ancestors. To me, the Torah is not just a book, it is the blueprint of existence, the very word of God handed down to our people through Moses. Every word, every letter carries infinite meaning. It has been my mission to honor it, to live by its teachings, and to pass its truths to those who seek them. My days were filled with the rhythm of devotion, early morning prayers, teaching young minds in our synagogue study hall, and counseling those who came to me with their struggles. I was often asked to speak at community events, weddings, and funerals as people trusted me to bring the wisdom of the Torah into the most important moments of their lives. I felt a profound sense of purpose in my work, knowing I was part of a tradition that stretched back thousands of years. I took great pride in my identity as a Jew. I had studied the Torah extensively, as well as the Talmud and the works of countless rabbis who came before me. Their interpretations and debates shaped my understanding of the divine and deepened my connection to God. To me, Christianity was nothing more than a divergence from the truth. Jesus was a figure we learned about in history, but one I dismissed without much thought. The idea that he could be the Messiah seemed absurd, even offensive, given how much his teachings strayed from the laws of the Torah. I wasn't hostile toward Christians, but I saw their beliefs as misguided. Whenever someone tried to engage me in discussions about Jesus, I would respectfully decline, sometimes offering a counterpoint rooted in the Torah. I believed that their faith, while well-meaning, was built on misinterpretations and false premises. I was confident in the path I walked and in the covenant God made with the Jewish people, but life has a way of humbling even the most certain among us. It was a Friday afternoon, just hours before Shabbat. I was rushing to prepare for the evening service when I felt an unusual tightness in my chest. At first, I thought it was nothing, a sign of stress from the week's responsibilities. I had experienced similar discomfort before and always shrugged it off, but this time it didn't pass. The tightness grew worse, radiating into my shoulders and arms. I tried to catch my breath, but each inhale felt shallower than the last. My wife, Leah, noticed my discomfort and insisted I sit down. "You're overworking yourself again," she said, her voice filled with concern. But even as I sat, the pain didn't ease. It intensified, a crushing weight pressing down on my chest. Panic began to set in. I tried to reassure her, tried to reassure myself that it was nothing serious, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. The next few minutes were a blur. Leah called for help, and before I knew it, paramedics were in our home, speaking quickly as they worked to stabilize me. I could hear their voices, distant and fragmented, as though I were underwater. My vision blurred, and the world around me started to fade. As they carried me to the ambulance, I felt a strange stillness creeping in. The pain, sharp and relentless moments ago, began to dull. My breathing slowed, and a sense of detachment washed over me. I looked at Leah one last time, her tear-filled eyes meeting mine as she whispered, "Hold on, David, hold on." I wanted to respond, to reassure her, but my voice wouldn't come. My world faded to black, and I felt myself slipping into an abyss. But even as my physical senses dimmed, I knew this wasn't the end. Somewhere deep inside, I felt it, a pull towards something I couldn't yet understand. Something was waiting for me just beyond the veil. When I opened my eyes, or at least what I thought were my eyes, I wasn't in my body anymore. It's a strange thing to describe, being outside yourself. One moment I was in the ambulance, overwhelmed by pain and chaos, and the next I was floating above it all, watching the scene unfold as though it were happening to someone else. Below me, I saw the paramedics working frantically. One was pressing on my chest, counting aloud as they performed compressions. Another held defibrillator paddles, ready to deliver a shock to restart my heart. Their faces were tense, their movements precise and urgent. I could even see the beads of sweat on their foreheads, glistening under the harsh lights of the ambulance. My own body looked small and fragile, pale and lifeless on the stretcher. It was strange, almost surreal to see myself from this perspective. I could hear their voices, though they sounded distant and muffled, like they were coming from another room. "We're losing him," one of them said, their tone sharp and focused. I wanted to shout to tell them I was still here, but my voice didn't work. Or maybe I no longer had one. I was just there, watching, waiting. And then I saw her, Leah. She had somehow followed the ambulance in her car, and now she was standing outside, her hands pressed against the window. Her face was a mask of anguish, tears streaming down her cheeks as she whispered a prayer. I felt a pang of sorrow, not for myself, but for her. I hated seeing her like that, powerless and afraid. I tried to reach out to comfort her, but my hand, if I even had one, passed right through the glass. That's when it hit me. I wasn't tethered to the physical world anymore. The realization was both freeing and terrifying. I had always dismissed the idea of a soul, of an existence beyond the body. Yet here I was, undeniably aware, completely separate from the flesh and blood that had defined me for so long. I didn't understand it, but I couldn't deny it either. As I floated there, trying to make sense of what was happening, I noticed something else, a light. It wasn't like any light I'd ever seen. It wasn't harsh or blinding, but soft and inviting, radiating warmth and a kind of purity that I couldn't quite describe. It seemed to pulse gently, as if it were alive, and it filled the space around me with an undeniable sense of peace. The light drew my attention immediately, pulling me toward it in a way that felt both natural and unsettling. I didn't want to move, didn't want to leave the scene below, but the pull was irresistible. It wasn't forceful, it was more like a silent invitation, one that spoke to something deep within me, something I didn't even know was there. Part of me resisted. As a rabbi, I had spent my life grounded in the teachings of the Torah, in the tangible and the historical. This light, this presence was foreign to everything I believed. What was it? Where did it come from? Was this some kind of trick, a hallucination brought on by my failing brain? I wanted to turn away, to reject it, but the pull was too strong. As I moved closer, the light seemed to grow, its warmth enveloping me like a gentle embrace. It wasn't just warmth, it was something deeper, something alive. I could feel it touching every part of me, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. It was as if it were reaching into the very core of my being, revealing parts of myself I had never known existed. And then I felt it, a presence within the light. It wasn't just an energy or a feeling. It was a presence, something aware, something holy. It was unlike anything I had ever encountered in my life. As a rabbi, I had always believed in God's presence in the world, but this was different. This wasn't the distant, unapproachable God I had imagined. This was personal, intimate, and overwhelmingly real. The presence didn't speak, not in words, but I felt its message as clearly as if it had. It was as though it was saying, "Come closer. There is more to see, more to know." I hesitated, torn between my skepticism and the undeniable truth of what I was experiencing. My entire life had been rooted in certainty, in the laws of the Torah, the teachings of my ancestors, the rituals that connected us to God. And yet this moment, this light, this presence, felt more real than anything I had ever known. I took a step, or maybe I was pulled, it was hard to tell, and the light grew brighter, its warmth more intense. The world I had known, the ambulance, the paramedics, even Leah's anguished face, began to fade into the background, replaced by the all-encompassing glow of the light. It wasn't that they disappeared. It was more like I was moving beyond them, into a realm where they no longer held the same importance. As I entered the light fully, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace, but also an anticipation, as though I were on the cusp of something extraordinary. Whatever lay ahead, I knew it would change me forever. When I returned to my body, gasping for breath and surrounded by the worried faces of my family and medical staff, I knew I had been profoundly changed. Leah held my hand tightly, her tears falling freely as she whispered a prayer of gratitude. The doctors called my recovery miraculous, but I knew it was more than that. It was a second chance. In the weeks that followed, I found myself reflecting deeply on what I had experienced. The light, the presence, the undeniable peace. It all pointed to a truth I had long resisted. I began studying the Torah anew. this time with an openness to seeing the connections I had previously dismissed. I read the words of the prophets with fresh eyes, and to my astonishment, I saw how they pointed to a fulfillment beyond what I had ever understood. I started to share my story cautiously at first, with Leah, my children, and a few trusted friends. Their reactions varied from skepticism to curiosity, but the more I spoke, the more I realized how deeply this experience had changed me. It wasn't about abandoning my faith or my heritage. It was about seeing it in its fullness, understanding that the promises of God were being fulfilled in ways I had never imagined. Gradually, my story began to spread. I was invited to speak at interfaith gatherings, where I shared my journey and the profound realization that faith is not about division, but about unity in the truth of God's love. Some people embraced my message with open hearts. Others struggled to reconcile it with their own beliefs. Yet through it all, I felt the same presence that had called me into the light, guiding me to share what I had seen and learned. Today, my life is a testament to transformation. I continue to serve my community, but with a renewed sense of purpose. My understanding of the Torah and my relationship with God have deepened in ways I never thought possible. The journey hasn't been easy, but it has been worth it. If there is one thing I have learned, it is that the truth has a way of finding us, even when we least expect it. And when it does, it changes everything.